Recognizing the member for Richmond South Centre.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It is my pleasure and privilege to stand up and speak about Motion 18. I just want to first of all take a moment to express my gratitude to many of our colleagues who spoke before me to express the importance for us to have a private member time to really share different perspectives and diversified experiences. I'm actually going to piggyback off members from Prince George Fairmont's comment about AED. We all went to a Heart and Stroke Foundation event, and I was able to listen, actually read the material. And one of the fascinating things they talked about is that most of heart attack actually happen in residence of individuals. And I think this also bring out a lot of experience reminding me, used to be a first aid attendant, also instructor, that AED also requires a certain amount of training. Why did I bring this story up? Because I do want to take a moment to thank the member from opposite. It's a reminder that all of us come from different backgrounds and different experiences. And we all want to contribute to this beautiful British Columbia and the BC legislature to share, really, what can we do to contribute for a better future for all of us, including our future generation. I want to take a moment, echoing one of my colleagues' comment earlier too, I want to take a moment to thank Richmond South Centre for sending me here to be a representative and to be able to speak on their behalf. And I think one thing I do want to echo again and again from my past speeches is that we're elected here to speak. We're elected here to be a voice. Because we spend our time in our constituency to listen, to understand, and to appreciate complexity. I think one of the important things too is I do want to take a moment to express the time I had on the Finance Committee. The time I was spending on there, it gave me an opportunity to travel around British Columbia and to really diversify my perspective around what BC has to offer, especially rural area, to see the challenges and difficulty and to hear different voices on things we want to bring back. I do want to say, putting all partisan aside, I know many of my rural colleagues probably have a lot to offer, and that we have a lot of urban colleagues who have a lot of different perspectives. I also want to take a moment to almost say, with different cultural background, with different gender background, to different sexual orientation, every MLA who come in here representing with a family, maybe a single parent, we all come here trying to be a voice. One of the things I want to express my gratitude to the idea of forming this committee is I know in the past, the private member time was really based upon a good agreement. It was based upon all-party goodwill and desire to let's work together and give private member a voice. And I think, unfortunately, in the past, there are moments that made us question whether that goodwill is still established. Like maybe we need to actually do an update of standing order to allow us to really have a regular, rigid structure so that we can protect the institution from political agendas. Speaking of political agendas, I want to go back to the Finance Committee that we had. And of course, the reality is, for the fact that somebody's sitting opposite from us and we're sitting on the government side, it's a fact that we have different perspective, different experience, and different objectives. And there's certain things that's more important to one of us than maybe not as important to others. I know many people was commenting that why some of us have so much time to talk about speeches that others might not find relevant. But I think for a society that was being modernized, civilized, we had to understand the right of self-determination. And what associated with that is to understand everybody has a different perspective and everything has different priorities. As a youth worker, I often mention this once, that to a youth, an embarrassment could mean the world to them. But adults, sometimes we might not fully appreciate the challenge they have. So I'm very glad on the Motion 18, it gives a chance to really for us to sit down to have discussion. I remember some of our colleagues from the opposite and us, we actually had dinner together at the Finance Committee. We actually had a conversation talking about topics. And that's one thing I really want to emphasize, I do want to emphasize, especially with the member from Vancouver, Mount Pleasant, who just left, is that when we're doing committee stage, we don't see any more character assassination anymore. It's often out of the picture. We have more discussion about topics, objectives, how things impacts the circumstances. We still will have challenges with one another. We are still different of opinions. But committees gives us a chance to really embrace the opportunity to share, to understand and appreciate. And that is the reason why I'm very glad. Like, again, I'm new to this chamber. I've been here 2 years. Unlike Minister for Public Safety and Solicitor General, who has extensive history, and of course, another colleague sitting opposite over there who has another extensive experience as well, how this historically came together, and how we have a historical different party, one being government and be opposition. And I also heard a House leader talk about what it feels like to be in opposition, what it feels like to be a governing MLAs. But I do want to remind everyone that the goal, the objective in the end, isn't about how we get there, but when we get there, we can create a private member time that gives private member an opportunity to share our perspective, to share our discussion, to share our goal. Because I think it is what we owe to our constituents for them to know where we stand on different issues. I think interesting some of the comments made earlier, and I don't come across criticism, but I do want to emphasize, I want to be clear about it. That when we keep on talking about we all agree, let's vote on it, or we all agree, let's vote on it. Well, I'm pretty sure we all agree on this bill as well. But as the member from the Sandwich North Island, I just want to express gratitude to his phenomenal perspective of him sharing his passion for democracy. I want to be sitting here talking about how much I appreciate being able to join by my colleague from government side and colleague from opposition to be able to have a dinner over and have discussion around important topics on Finance Committee, where we have good, healthy discussion without going down to a point of character assassination. Instead, there are times the discussion gets heated. We took a break, and we still walk around with each other, have conversation, and enjoy each other's company. Why is a private member, in my opinion, important? Because I think some of our colleagues echoed about it already, and I'm pretty sure a future speaker will say it too. Every one of us come from different writing. Every one of us represent different community. Every one of us have a different life experience. And again, I want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to a member of Vancouver Mount Pleasant when she shared her complex, challenging history, where she overcame so many difficulties and reached to a point, one of the highest point an Indigenous female has ever reached in our province. And to us, it is an important story to remind us what kind of single parents are experiencing. It's our institution welcoming single parents. Talking about people from Indigenous background, it's our institution finding out a way to encourage people with Indigenous background. It's our institution finding different ways to allow different people speaking different language to be part of a conversation. If we truly believe in multiculturalism and diversity, how are we allowing voice to be heard? And be able to have this committee coming together to have a conversation around private members' opportunity to share, exchange, and really have a comfort saying the standing order will now protect us, and therefore we can focus on doing what is right instead of playing political games. It's important for all of us. As a colleague, independent colleague mentioned earlier too, is this conversation was meant to have a conversation earlier, but it was sort of through the procedural, through discussion, and through political games, it waited till now. And I think all of our private members, including government and opposition side, and we all want to have a strong, healthy political climate that we can all work together towards. We all agree we are facing global challenges right now. We all agree we're facing different crises in our province. And we all agree there are many, many potential ideas that are being shared around. Some are good, some are bad, some are being repeated multiple times, and some of them might not be feasible when we actually add it into the complexity of our legislature. But I think it's important for us to share. And I think as a private member, that's why we're here. Sometimes we want to be part of the decision-making process. Sometimes we want to solve problems for our constituents. And sometimes we want to be here because we want to feel like our constituent put the energy and time to send us here. We want to make sure my time spending on their behalf is well spent. That I'm doing my best to fight for their best interest, fighting for their family's best interest, and to ensure things that need to be talked about aren't avoided. I think one of the things that truly helped me to be reminded about this private member committees coming together, for us to actually have a discussion on how we can have this conversation on empowering private member, is also to realize, if you look at this chamber, we have one of the most diverse government in history, British Columbia history. We have now far stronger gender equity in our legislature, we're trying to find more ways to bring more individuals from different backgrounds to be part of our conversation. And I think it would be unhealthy for any government to assume we don't need to hear from opposition. I think it would be unhealthy for any government to assume we know everything we're doing. And that's why I'm glad our House leader, I assume working with the other House leaders as well, to come up with a way to ensure we can have this committee so we can thoroughly and appropriately discuss how can we ensure important and respectable voices are heard, constructive voices are heard, voices, ideas that's been sharpened, criticized, but forged through discussion can be utilized to better British Columbia together. I know I keep on going back to my finance committee days, and I'm still part of finance committee. I shouldn't say back to my finance committee days, but we had dinner with opposition members. We had a lot of sitting down conversation. We traveled together. You know, we had often a lot of jokes along the way. It's a completely different atmosphere than what we have here, and I think that's what's needed. People will need to come together and realize what we say will not be used against us, so we can truly express the challenges, the difficulty, and the perspective of how we can better shape our private member time. I want to echo again the member from Saanich North Island, is the importance of democracy. Democracy is what kept us here together. Our society is facing a lot of different threats, from false information, fake news. We're dealing with threats of dictatorship invading sovereign countries. We have people now having confusing informations. We have people going around to giving different mixed information from different community groups to cause conflicts and frictions. Democracy isn't perfect. We all understand that. But it's the best system we can work with at this point to ensure power and checks are balanced and ideas are shared. But of course, I understand where the independent member mentioned earlier. We all want to continue to serve our constituency. We all are taking this position of privilege with honor, with dignity, and with respect, and be humbled by the tradition and heritage associated with our job title. And we want to continue that. And of course, Honorable Speaker, as we keep on calling you honorable, we respect you for your nonpartisanship, helping us keeping this meeting in order and have a conversation. And that's what we would love to see in our committee as well. As we continue to talk about the different board too, we also heard different ideas being shared. And sometimes for theatrical needs of the chamber, ideas are being exaggerated. I'm not doing this just to pick on the member from Thompson, South Thompson. I just want to have a mathematical correction. We're 11 days into 43 days. That's 25%, not 30%. But just put it out there. But it is a good example that sometimes for the sake of presentation, for the sake of conflict, for the sake of political benefit, we lose sight of how we can work better together. So I am enthusiastically supporting our House leaders coming together to really put together this private member committee, to really force to really ask ourselves, what can we do to share out some of the challenges, to really ask ourselves, how can we ensure voices are properly heard? I apologize, I wasn't sure what's going on. Thank you so much. And I do want to emphasize that even, for example, if you don't mind me going back to even talk about Lunar New Year, many people know I attend a lot of Lunar New Year in the month of January. And it is also a reminder, even a simple holiday, maybe to other people is a simple structured holiday. There's different cultures have different practices, different zodiac animals, and different language usage, and different perspectives. And yet, at the same time, according to my speech back then, we all share the same principle, same desire for peace, hope, and prosperity. And I'm hoping, and I sincerely hope, and I do believe I have faith into this, that our private member committee will also bring this diversity back together through Motion 18, and that we might all have a different language, different perspective, different experiences and yet at the same time share the same hope to ensure private members, whether it's opposition or government side, that we are able to continuously find different ways to share good ideas. I know a member from Prince of Fairmont as pointed out in our mandate letters for the ministers, we are asking for ways to reach out across the aisle to truly appreciate what could be considered, what could be explored, and what could be used. As we continuously moving forward, and we will continue facing various different challenges as a government, as a British Columbia, because we're not facing climate change. We're facing a lot of social challenges. We're dealing with a lot of fake news on social media as well. We are also dealing with a lot of, drought, forest fire. We have different kind of ministries just start popping out to support one another. But I think the ultimate goal is the more complex, the more unpredictable, the more unprecedented our future is, the more we rely upon the creativity, diversity, and innovation of our colleagues here to come together to really find a solution to protect, serve, and helping British Columbians to prosper. I also want to take a moment to really talk about the importance of us to really look at different potential private member motion, private member statements, and private member bill. I understand our hope is really there to find ideas, but of course, there are different perspectives and they'll create friction and challenges. But I do know one of the opportunities I do enjoy as MLA in this legislature for the last 2 years is being able to speak at private member time. I spoke to many, many issues. I think one of the things that I truly, deeply want to champion back then is the importance to combat against gender-based violence. In a private member time, I know I mentioned many things about how cross-cultural challenges associated with gender-based violence, how many individuals who I used to work with, who I know, do not understand that what they experience is form of gender-based violence. It's important for us to continue to bring that into government's awareness, to different ministers, to really help us finding ways to how we can advance important strategies for equity, fairness, and justice. And it is actually also one of the few times I really get to sit down and do some really good homework. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to learn how to also do a private member bill as well. I want to take a moment to thank our government in 2017 to the back then Attorney General, currently a Premier, to share the drafters with all of us so that we can develop a new skill set that previously was not available to a private member. I know this private member type has historically built upon agreement, consensus, and willingness to cooperate and collaborate, and it has faced some challenges in the past. And I'm glad that through this multi-party collaboration, we are now finding the value behind supporting private members. And I know member from, my apology. Member from opposite mentioned earlier too, is assuming if this government swapping back and forth, it will happen in the future, we don't know. But I really sincerely hope that no matter which way we're switching around, this private member spirit, the spirit of allowing private members to be a strong, well-heard voice will be kept. And we'll continue to find ways to really say, we need voice of diversity. We need to find different perspectives, different angles, different individuals' voices to ensure that no matter how challenges become diverse, complex, difficult, we will have a robust system to say we will find ways to find the strengths, creativity, and courage collectively to address issues so all British Columbians can benefit from our willingness to collaborate and cooperate. Whether now we have whether this is a proper committee or the other committee, I think the final spirit is the same thing. The spirit of doing this motion 18 is to ensure the elected official representing the constituency, as I represent Richmond South Centre, will be given a great opportunity to truly, appropriately, to continuously be a voice for Richmond South Centre. I think my colleague from Surrey Panorama mentioned earlier very clearly, we all have a right now to speak about anything or everything. But I do encourage everybody to have an opportunity, whether it is a common consensus that we all agreed upon, that we should still be speaking about it so that our constituents can have a voice and to understand where we stand, that whether or not they feel like they have elected the right person to represent them. And I think another thing I do also want to emphasize too is when I used to be a youth worker, I want to go back to that conversation, is that I used to have a youth leadership team where they will come out with projects. Me, as individual, look at it and say, wow, this is way too difficult. I don't think you guys can pull it off. But through different conversations, from different discussion, even though I was uncertain, I want them to have the opportunity to try it out, to really explore and to really understand what it's like to potentially fail or succeed. And often, my best amazement is to be proven wrong. Having them telling me I might not know everything I do, and proven to me that through their dedication commitment, they're able to do something that I perceive as not doable. Why am I bringing this thing up? Because I think it's important for us to realize that through conversation, through dialogue, through strategy, through explorations, we will see greater depths. Just because we all agree on this topic, it doesn't mean I understand the opposition members' concept, or I understand my colleagues' perspective, or understand different individuals who might actually have a different tone, why they support a policy. So I, again, go back to motion 18 and want to emphasize again why I'm supportive of a committee to review the private members' business. Is to really ask ourselves, how can we support our private members? But mostly, to how can we ensure that British Columbians can be heard through every elected officials, to really to understand that we're here to represent. And through conversation discussion, we don't just simply represent a voice, but we represent a desire to make British Columbia better, represent a desire to bring peace and prosperity to British Columbians, to represent a desire to bring fairness and justice for British Columbian, a desire to forge dialogue, forge conversation, and forge bridges of communication, and yet still empower individuals to have right to self-determination. And this is a kind of strength built through understanding and through conversation. I don't think any one of us will be as powerful as we collective through our conversation and dialogue. And that's the reason why I'm encouraged when our government is opening up the opportunity to allow private members to be not just simply a voice in the background, but have a voice to truly, properly, through records of answers, to be shared and to be understood by community. And through exchange of ideas that we may better ourselves to understand more of a comprehensive, more in-depth understanding of a complex situation that often we as British Columbians have to face. It's not acceptable for us to assume any one of us knows everything. But I think if we keep having an open mind, a willingness to learn, to listen, and of course, I will say shedding off a lot of the partisan characteristic attacks, and to really have conversations, I think we can reach a consensus where how we can better British Columbia and better our primary members' time to serve British Columbians. I'm going to go back to the Finance Committee again, and I want to take a moment to thank all my colleagues on my government side and all the colleagues on the opposite side. Finance Committee also was a difficult, exhausting time. It was also a time we get to humanize one another, to really have a conversation, to listen to one another, and to really appreciate individuals standing in front of us, and to respect individuals as human beings, and to take away this personal attack, character assassinations, and to focus on topics, evidence, and ideas, and sharing it back and forth. And in the end, understanding that we still need a governing structure to allow us to make decisions. Whether there's division or whether there's differences, we still need to have a conclusion at the end of the day. But one thing I don't want to go back. I just want to go back to, for example, the Health Committee, even though I didn't sit on it. I've been hearing so many good things. The desire for all parties to come up with conclusions where we all have a desire to save lives, all desire to find a way to fight against stigmatization, the desire to really allow us to find strategy to embrace and bring people into British Columbia and to have a healthcare system that can serve the most vulnerable among us. And to also, from what I heard from the Finance Committee, to break away our generalization that doesn't match the reality we have to deal with. Because conversation and discussion, especially through committee stage, it helps us to understand sometimes we might form perceptions based upon logic, based upon experience. But when you put it against real life examples, sometimes it turns our paradigm upside down. So as an individual, as someone who is a private member on the government side, I'm excited that this committee will empower the private member from both the government and opposition and the third party and independent to be able to come together, to be able to say, what can we do to create a system that is fair, constructive, and productive to support our government, support British Columbians, to ensure all kinds of ideas and voices are heard, shared, exchanged, forged, and prepared to utilize to serve our British Columbians through our government. Of course, at the end of this time, I do want to take a moment to again thank Richmond South Center for sending me here today. I'm privileged to have an opportunity to spend 30 minutes sitting up here and express my support for Motion 18. And I know my opposition colleagues is going to do the exact same thing. I know opposition are calling the member from San Antonio Green friends, we'll just call him Green colleagues. But I'm pretty sure even the third party and independents will all come together to really say, we want to do this, not because it fulfills some kind of hidden agenda, but we know this is what we can do to ensure British Columbians can have a best voice being heard through different ideas. So that way we, as a private member, can use our time wisely and to serve British Columbians. Because as private member, and of course on opposition side, as different opposition members, we all have a desire to find different ways to better the lives of British Columbians, our loved ones, and our future generation. We face different kind of challenges such as climate change, like natural disasters. We have a flood, we have drought. We'll have even more greater threats. As I mentioned earlier from my previous speech, one of my biggest concerns for Richmond South Center, which I believe some of my Richmond colleagues have shared a similar concern, is potential flood and potential water drought and potential, my apology.
Just to try and understand the relevance to this specific bill.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll get back to you. To talk about water flood and drought. And that is an important voice to be heard. Why I'm talking about a private member Motion 18 is to ensure that this kind of voice might be heard by a little corner of Richmond, but brought to a bigger picture of a part of our government. I think one thing we have to continuously respect the fact that every member have a complete different experience when they serve the constituency. Like, we often joke, Richmond is a small cousin of insignificant cousin of Vancouver, because Vancouver has so much great, I think, happening. But Richmond is a phenomenal city. I do want to say that. I really enjoy it. And all my three colleagues are here, and we all love representing Richmond. But we all know Richmond has a unique perspective in many challenges as well. As I mentioned earlier, through my time with the Finance Committee, I also learned about interesting things about rural part of British Columbia that I didn't have a privilege to understand and appreciate before. And I would love to, through a private member time, private member motion, to really understand and to hear and to observe, to better myself, so that we will understand that decision made in this chamber impacts everybody in this province. And yet we have to find a balance. We have to find a fine-tuning. We have to find a perfection to ensure that we can actually serve everyone without leaving people behind. I'm glad our government is devoted to the idea that we will only prosper when we all prosper together. And we'll be successful when we all succeed together. Which means it doesn't matter which part of British Columbia, whether it's rural, urban, island, mainland, or any other part of British Columbia, that those voices can be heard. And that is why private member time is so important to be fine-tuned, understood. I know my colleague from Surrey Panorama mentioned very clearly, if a discussion is done, we find something ready to go, maybe we'll present, they can present earlier. I apologize for that. But I'm a big believer. I'm a bigger believer that a Motion 18, the private member business, is extremely important to all of us, that the discussion in the committee stage will be long, will be extensive, and it will be very detail-oriented. Because we must understand how we can better British Columbia together without a partisanship. So I want to take a moment to, again, thank Richmond South Center for sending me here. I'm glad we now have a new platform, potentially, to allow me to represent Richmond South Center in a different angle, different way, and different strategy. And I want to thank all my colleagues for sharing their perspective, and I want to encourage all my colleagues, let us together make private member time one of the most functional, constructive time in Canada. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.